you know?
And tell me a little bit about like, were you afraid to start writing a book, or was it like you were like, yes, I'm straight jumping into that? A little bit about the process of writing it.
Yeah, sure. I think I definitely was a little reticent at first to just hop in and start doing it because first of all, it's a memoir. So I started writing it as fiction. I'd only ever really written fiction before. And at one point, one of my editors said to me, Scott, where are you getting all these crazy stories from getting deported from England to getting kidnapped in the Jordanian desert and all this other crazy stuff? And I said, Michael, um, it's true. A lot of it is just rooted in truth. This is based off of my life experience. And he said, well, then write this as a memoir. And I sort of said, 22-year-olds don't write memoirs. And he said, exactly, that's the point. So, do it, be the first. And so I started doing it, and the rest is history.
And writing a memoir, writing about yourself, how's that? What challenges
And I think
were there?
it's different from what I'd done before. I'd written in the first person before, but it was fiction. And so it was interesting because, I think it requires a lot of reflection, and also editing. Like it's tough to edit yourself and your own stories and your own voice, but I obviously had some great editors along the way. And for me, what the fun part about it was that I get to share my story with people. So at first it was a bit daunting, but I sort of warmed up to it, and went from there.
Because I just finished writing as well, and my first book, and it's very similar. I've traveled to like 50 plus countries, and it's always life lessons that I learned along the way.
Yeah,
And
there
like
you
you're
go.
saying, like editing yourself is like when you first you write, you just write, you don't want to look at it. I don't know, do you have such feeling as well? You're like, oh, like this is okay, because I write a lot about self reflection and like the lessons I've learned on the road, not so much about like adventures.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like every chapter even has like a little lesson tucked into it. The mistakes I made, the things I could have done better along the way. Um, and when you're reading yourself, it is definitely, I think it requires a different sort of eye for detail and ability to like step back from the work, because you're not, at least when it's fiction, you can ask yourself, okay, what is this character thinking about? How does this character fit into the larger narrative? But when you're thinking about yourself and you think about yourself as a character, first of all, you can't make shit up. Like because it's a memoir, and or like invent some new detail that brings the story together. And second of all, I think it's in some ways harder to get inside your own head and think about what you were thinking at the time, what you're thinking now. Um, and to be, you have to kill your darlings and be really brutal with yourself. And I think certainly having a good editor helps with that. But writing a memoir for me was an interesting challenge, and I enjoyed rising to the occasion.
Did you feel judged that you're writing a memoir at like age 22, where some people saying like, oh, like what are you doing, like what do you know from life?
Yeah, certainly. I think a bit at first, like one, like even not other people, but yourself. You're saying, "What? Who am I to give advice to other people, or to be sharing my own memoirs, especially so young?" But I think moving past that, I get a lot of positive feedback, and at some point, it's having a story to tell. Is there a story there? And the publishing company certainly thought there was a story there. It was the beginning, and then they believed in me. I believed in myself, and you have to ask yourself, particularly when you're writing chapter after chapter, whether this is part of your story, and whether this makes sense within the larger scheme of things, and whether it's worth it for other people to be reading about you, particularly so young, things that I was doing when I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. Um, and at the end of the day, it just comes down to a simple question: is there a story here? And if so, like what's the message behind it? And if you can answer that, then and have a good answer to it, then you know that the story belongs in there. And if you can't answer that, then you have to axe it. This thing was probably double the length it is now, before editing and revisions.
So how do you answer those questions for yourself if I ask them to you?
Well, I think it's dependent upon the chapter. Like you read a chapter, you ask yourself, is this an interesting story to tell, or is it just something that might be interesting to me but isn't interesting to other people?
Okay,
And
let me rephrase the question then. So which chapter do you think would be the most interesting to read for a 22-year-old in, let me think, when in Australia?
In Australia, well, all of them. No, I'm kidding. There's some really crazy stories in there. Like I got getting kidnapped in the Jordanian desert. I had this language scholarship to go and learn Arabic in Jordan when I was in high school, and I went over there to learn Arabic. One day we were out in the Great Rift Valley, in what's called Wadi Rum, which is like just miles and miles of desert. We went out like just to see it, and like to have these like Bedouin camps basically. And we went out to the desert to stay there. And they picked us up on the side of the highway. We drove out there. We got to our little like encampment. There's like these mini mountains in the desert, and so everyone wanted to go climb this one mini mountain, and me and this other girl I was with wanted to go climb another one, which was further away. So we climbed it. We watched this gorgeous blood orange sunset, and we ended up descending a different face of the mountain than the one we ascended, just by accident. And we ran into this angry Bedouin, and he didn't want to help us at first, and then he told us to like get in his car, and we were gonna like run away in the desert. Like what, we were at his mercy basically. We got in the trunk of his car. He drove us around for like an hour. We had to change cars 3 times. The whole thing. And so that certainly would be an interesting story. Getting deported from England, I was detained for 9 hours, and fingerprinted and photographed and put through the whole immigration ringer in England. I watched my boss get shot. Well, I didn't watch the bullet go in, but I was working for a guy who got shot in DC.